right, everyone. We're going to do a little bit more today on a subject that has been approaching and has already been met several times in discussion, and that is the subject of air masses and where they form, their qualities, and what happens in between two air masses at the edges, and thus what are fronts, the fronts of air masses. And that is what I want to try to talk about in these videos. April 25th, 2020, COVID-19, edutainment. So here we are, we're at the East River, at the base of the footbridge, where the East River and actually the Harlem River diverge, heading north for the Harlem and east for the East River. I'm looking south, and I'm going to draw a little picture of our United States here, very crude. I've drawn that kind of picture in the past. I hope you can see it. It's a little bit light, but the idea here is that over our great nation, we often have air masses forming, and the air masses affect our weather, and where the air masses meet, we have these things called fronts. And so, very briefly, what you should be aware of is that there are always warm air masses forming down here in the Gulf of Mexico. And we call those air masses maritime, M, tropical, MT. Maritime because they're forming over the water, and tropical because they're warm. At the same time, in any time of year, you can have a second type of air mass forming over Canada and then moving down in the United States, and that would be your CP air mass, or Continental Polar. And when these two air masses meet along the front of the cold or the front of the warm, one moving likewise in this way southeast and one moving northeast, that is where we can have exciting weather. But if we continued our map to the south over Mexico, we could find ourselves with yet another type of air mass known as continental, another C, tropical. Continental because it's formed over the land. Tropical because it's warm. Maritime over here because it's formed over the sea. And tropical because it's warm. And finally, we could always end up with our last major air mass that would form over the ocean, say here. That would be maritime, M, and P for polar. Continental polar, cold. Maritime polar, cold. Ocean, land. And again, each one of these are separate air masses forming over particular areas of the earth and beginning to move. And where they come in contact with another air mass of different quality, continental over the land versus maritime over the ocean, is an area where fronts form. And there are several types of fronts. So we're still on Randall's Island here. I'm going to try to do my little drawing on a darker surface, although maybe I should be doing it in shadow. We'll give it a shot. You hear behind me or actually it's right over there, red-winged blackbird. That seems to like it around here. So let me give it a shot. So it's that map, crude again, of the United States. I think we got it there. And what we want to be aware of then are these air masses that form. And if we continue down with Mexico, which you can't really see, let me tilt this back. Just tilt this a little bit. Yeah, that's a little better. Very crude. We have our Maritime Polar, using the same colors, small m, big P. We have our Maritime Tropical over the Gulf of Mexico, small m, big T. We've got our Continental Polar, which really forms over Canada. I think you got that, yep. Continental Polar. And then our Continental, small c, big T, over Mexico. Now we can take our Maritime Polar, maritime meaning that the ocean is here, polar meaning the air generally is colder, and we have another Maritime Polar on the east side of the United States. So these are places where air masses form in North America. Now, it is also true that there is a final air mass that can form further north called your continental Arctic. I hope that's not quite out of the picture, but I can't really tell. It may well be. And those, ladies and gentlemen, are your typical air masses for the North American continent that impact our weather. So here are those air masses again, just a quick another point of view, and I just like a little clearer. And let me just finish up with a circle around our Maritime Polar to the north and east of our region, and a circle around our Continental Tropical over Mexico. And again, the characteristics of these air masses: Continental Tropical, hot and dry. Maritime Tropical, warm and moist, humid. Maritime Polar, moist, humid, but cold. Continental Polar, dry and cold. And Continental Arctic, dry and very cold. Now, we should be aware that these air masses can move into our region at any time of year. So a Continental Polar air mass moving into our region in the summer is clearly not as cold as a Continental Polar air mass moving into our region in the winter. Likewise, a Maritime Tropical air mass moving into our region in the winter is not as warm as a Maritime Tropical air mass moving into our region in the summer. Here we are, the Great Rail Bridge, connecting Queens, Manhattan to the rest of the country, and beautiful little flowering trees, one little boat, power plant. I think that's about it, ladies and gentlemen.